Brandon Hale walked into the Providence Municipal Court with the silence of a man who wasn't used to waiting for anything. Billionaire, real estate tycoon, a man who owned half the skyline. People whispered his name as he passed, but his eyes were focused straight ahead, cold and unreadable. Across the room stood Michael Turner, a thin, exhausted man in worn-out clothes, clutching a folded paper like it was the last thing he owned. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, but his eyes told a different story. Fear mixed with something deeper, something painful. Judge Franklin, the soft-spoken, kind-eyed man known for patience and wisdom, studied the two men with quiet curiosity. There was something off. Two men from completely different worlds standing for the same case. Same traffic violation. Same morning. Same street. But their energy couldn't have been more opposite. Brandon stepped forward first, calm and almost amused, as if none of this mattered. Michael, however, looked like his entire life depended on this moment. His hand shook just slightly. His heartbeat seemed loud enough to fill the courtroom. Judge Franklin leaned forward, noticing the tension between them. This wasn't a simple ticket. There was a story hiding in the quiet air between these two men. Then Brandon turned his head toward Michael. His voice dropped to a low, chilling whisper, just loud enough for the judge to hear. "I own you," he said. The courtroom froze. Michael didn't respond. He couldn't. His eyes dropped to the floor, his breath unsteady. Judge Franklin's expression changed. Not anger, not surprise, but concern. Something deeper was happening here, something that had nothing to do with a traffic violation. For the first time, the billionaire's confidence cracked, just barely, when the judge asked a simple question. "Mr. Turner, why does he believe he owns you?" Michael swallowed hard. Everyone waited. He finally lifted his eyes, shining with a truth he had tried to hide for years. "Because he saved my life." The courtroom felt smaller after Michael's confession, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Judge Franklin didn't move. He simply watched the young man standing before him, noticing every tremor in his hands, every pause in his breathing. There was history in Michael's voice. History that didn't belong in a traffic courtroom, yet somehow had found its way here. Michael Turner had always lived quietly. A factory worker for most of his adult life, he lived paycheck to paycheck, surviving rather than living. After the factory shut down, everything spiraled. He lost his apartment, his savings, and eventually, even the people who once called him family. Life had pushed him into corners where the light barely reached. Yet he still carried himself with a soft humility, as though he expected nothing from the world. Brandon Hale was the opposite in every possible way. Born into wealth, refined by luxury, sharpened by empire building. His name carried a reputation, ruthless in business, untouchable in power. But beneath that polished exterior was a man who didn't believe in charity, only transactions. Every relationship, every decision, every moment had a cost attached. People didn't get close to him. They couldn't afford to. Years ago, the two men met on a night that neither could forget. Michael, standing on the edge of a bridge during his darkest moment, had been ready to give up entirely. Brandon, driving home from a gala in a tailored suit and polished shoes, had stopped his car the moment he noticed a figure leaning dangerously over the railing. He approached without hesitation. He didn't speak with softness or sympathy. Instead, he made a deal. He told Michael he would help him get back on his feet, pay for a place to stay, even help him find work. But in exchange, Michael owed him. Owed his effort. Owed his promise to try again. Owed the chance to rebuild his life rather than throw it away. And Michael had agreed. Since that night, Brandon had paid for 6 months of Michael's motel room, bought him new clothes, and funded a basic training program that helped him land a small delivery job. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't kindness. It felt more like a contract, one that Michael never fully understood. Brandon never asked for thanks. He asked for obedience. He checked in, demanded updates, and reminded Michael, often, that his second chance came with a price. When Michael got the traffic ticket, he panicked. He knew Brandon hated setbacks. He knew the billionaire believed failure was a form of disrespect. So when Brandon offered to accompany him to court, Michael didn't refuse. He never refused. And now they were here, standing before a judge who could see that the weight on Michael's shoulders didn't belong to a simple violation. Judge Franklin looked at Brandon next. The billionaire stood with an effortless confidence, but there was something tight in his jaw, something defensive. He wasn't used to people questioning him, let alone understanding the depth of the hold he kept over others. The judge folded his hands gently. He knew this wasn't about money, or fines, or a ticket. It was about control, about gratitude twisted into possession, about a man saved but not freed. And the real story was only beginning. The tension in the room thickened as Judge Franklin gently set the paperwork aside. He wasn't looking at the case anymore. He was looking at the men, one trembling, one unshaken, both tied together by a night that changed them in different ways. Michael stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if expecting blame to fall on him. Brandon, meanwhile, appeared entirely composed. His suit was perfect, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed. Anyone walking in would assume he was the victim of an inconvenience rather than a participant in a complicated emotional knot. "Mr. Turner," the judge asked softly, "do you believe you owe your life to Mr. Hale?" Michael hesitated. I don't know if owe is the right word. He helped me. He really did. I wouldn't be here today without him. And yet, Judge Franklin continued, "You look afraid of him." Michael swallowed hard but said nothing. The judge turned his gaze to Brandon. "And you, sir? Why did you tell this man you own him?" Brandon didn't flinch. "Because it's the truth." He made a commitment to change, a commitment to rise up, a commitment to use what I gave him. I didn't save him to watch him fall back into the same hole. "It's a traffic ticket," the judge replied. "It's a pattern," Brandon shot back. Michael's head lowered. A quiet shame settled over his features. He knew what Brandon meant. He had missed calls, missed check-ins. He had struggled to keep up with bills. He had slipped a few times, dipping dangerously close to the hopelessness he once escaped. Brandon noticed every detail, every sign of weakness, and every time he reminded Michael of their deal. But to Judge Franklin, something fell off. The billionaire didn't speak like a man showing tough love. He spoke like someone guarding an investment, someone terrified of losing control over a story he thought he had rewritten. "Mr. Turner," the judge said, "tell me what happened the morning of this violation." Michael took a deep breath. "I was running late for work. My tire blew out on the freeway the night before, and I couldn't afford tow. I walked home. I used my last bit of money to get a ride to work the next day. I thought if I was late again, I'd lose the job, so I borrowed a friend's old car. I didn't know the registration was expired. I didn't know the inspection was overdue. I was just trying to make it on time." "You had all this from me," Brandon said, voice sharp. "I was trying," Michael replied quietly. "I didn't want to disappoint you again." Brandon stepped forward. "You think I helped you so you could hide things? You think you can survive without structure? You think—" "Mr. Hale," Judge Franklin interrupted gently, "this is a courtroom. Only one person gives orders here." For the first time, Brandon fell silent. The judge took a moment. He could see Michael's fear wasn't just about losing his job or the fine. The fear came from being trapped between gratitude and pressure, between wanting to be better and being afraid of failing the man who pulled him back from the edge. "Michael," the judge asked, "why didn't you ask Mr. Hale for help?" "Because every time I slip," Michael said, voice cracking just slightly, "I feel like I owe him more, and I'm scared he'll walk away. I'm scared I'll go back to nothing." A flicker of emotion crossed Brandon's face, something human, something vulnerable, but it disappeared quickly. "I didn't ask you for anything you couldn't give," Brandon said. "I invested in you because you were worth saving." "Saving someone isn't ownership," Judge Franklin replied softly. The billionaire's jaw tightened. "If I hadn't stopped that night, he wouldn't even be here." "That may be true," the judge said, "but now that he is here, he deserves to live without fear." A quiet murmur rippled through the spectators. Something was unraveling in the air, something Brandon didn't expect, something Michael had carried hidden for too long. The judge leaned back in his chair, still calm, still gentle. He could feel the breaking point approaching. The truth was pressing against the room like a rising tide. And both men, savior and saved, were about to confront the part of the story neither had ever said aloud. A stillness settled over the courtroom, the kind that feels like the air is waiting for someone to finally speak the truth they've been running from. Judge Franklin watched both men closely, sensing that the moment they had been circling around was almost within reach. The case file in front of him had become irrelevant. What mattered now was the silence between the two men who once met on a bridge and were now standing on opposite sides of their own unspoken pain. He leaned forward. "Mr. Turner," he said gently, "I want you to tell me what you're truly afraid of. Not the ticket, not the job. What is the fear that follows you?" Michael's eyes shifted to Brandon, then back to the judge. He took a breath, steady but heavy. "I'm afraid of becoming a burden again," he finally said. "When you lose everything, when you hit the point where you're ready to end it, you don't ever forget that feeling. And when someone saves you, you live every day trying not to disappoint them." Brandon doesn't see it, but sometimes his help feels like a reminder that I failed once. And if I fail again, I'll lose the only person who didn't walk away. Brandon's mask of confidence cracked. He turned slightly, studying Michael with an expression that wasn't anger anymore, but confusion, maybe even guilt. Judge Franklin shifted his gaze. "Mr. Hale, your turn. You brought this man here today. You believe you saved him. But I need to know why that night became your responsibility to control." Brandon hesitated, a rare moment for him. The courtroom's attention felt like a weight on his shoulders, but it was the judge's steady eyes that forced him inward. "When I pulled him off that bridge," Brandon began slowly, "I saw myself. Or, at least, someone I used to be." His voice softened without him meaning to. "People look at my life and think I've never struggled, but they don't know how easy it is to hide pain behind success. Years ago, I lost someone close to me because I thought money could fix what they were going through. I thought guidance was ownership. I thought control meant protection." He paused, as if the memory tightened inside his chest. "When I saw Michael that night, I didn't think. I just reacted. And when he agreed to let me help, I told myself I wouldn't let him fall the way I let someone else fall. So I pushed him. Hard. Too hard. Because I was trying to save someone I'd already lost." A quiet ripple moved through the room. Even Michael looked stunned, hearing truths he never realized Brandon carried. Judge Franklin nodded slowly. "So you weren't saving him. You were trying to rewrite your own past." Brandon lowered his gaze. "Maybe." Michael's voice came out soft. "I never knew that. You never told me." "You didn't need my story," Brandon replied quietly. "You needed structure. You needed a reason to stay alive. And I thought being strict would keep you from slipping back." The judge took in the moment, the vulnerability finally showing between the lines of power and fear. "Both of you," he said gently, "have been chained to a memory. One bound by guilt, one bound by gratitude. Neither of those are freedom." Michael looked up, eyes glassy but steady. "I don't want to be owned," he said, "but I also don't want to lose the one person who pulled me out." Brandon's voice softened. "You were never something I wanted to own. I just didn't know how to let go of the fear of failing again." Judge Franklin breathed out a slow, warm exhale. "Then this is the moment you both let go. Not of each other, but of the weight you're carrying." It was subtle, but something shifted. Michael stood a little taller. Brandon's shoulders eased, the iron grip on his composure finally relaxing. The room felt different, lighter, honest. The turning point had arrived. The past had finally spoken. And now, for the first time, both men were ready to hear it. A quiet calm settled in the courtroom, as if the storm that had been building finally released its hold. Judge Franklin let the silence breathe for a moment. He'd seen hundreds of cases, thousands of faces, but rarely did he witness two men standing on the edge of a truth that could change both of them. He folded his hands, his voice warm and steady. "Gentlemen," he said, "you both came here today thinking this was about a ticket. But it was never about the violation. It was about the bond that formed on a bridge years ago, a bond neither of you fully understood." Michael stood still, but a softness returned to his features, something closer to hope than fear. Brandon, for the first time that day, looked human rather than invincible. Their roles, savior and saved, had blurred into something more honest. Judge Franklin turned first to Michael. You did not deserve to carry the weight of someone else's expectations. You were fighting to rebuild your life, and that is a battle you don't win overnight. Mistakes don't make you unworthy. They make you human. Michael lowered his head, but not out of shame. It was relief, a breath he hadn't taken in years. Then the judge looked at Brandon. And you, Mr. Hale, have a generous heart, whether you admit it or not. But generosity is not ownership. Guidance is not control. Saving someone does not give you the right to shape their future as if it belongs to you. Brandon didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply listened, absorbing every word. This court believes in accountability, the judge continued, but not the kind built on fear. The kind built on growth. He picked up the file, glanced at it briefly, then set it down again. The fine for the expired registration is dismissed. The inspection issue is also dismissed. You were trying to keep your job, Mr. Turner, not trying to break the law. A sigh ran through the room, somewhere between relief and realization. But more importantly, Judge Franklin added gently, I am giving you both something far more valuable than a ruling. I'm giving you permission to start over. Michael blinked, confused. Start over? With honesty, the judge said. With boundaries. With mutual respect instead of obligation. He turned to Brandon. If you want to help him, then help him as an equal, not as someone who owes you his life. Brandon nodded slowly. It wasn't defeat. It was acceptance. And Michael, the judge said softly, you don't owe him perfection. You owe him gratitude, yes. But gratitude does not mean surrendering your freedom. There was a pause. A gentle, healing pause. Michael looked at Brandon. I want to rebuild my life, he said. Not because you expect it, but because I want it. I want to stand on my own. Brandon's reply was quiet, almost humbled. Then I'll support you. But I won't control you anymore. Judge Franklin smiled. The kind of smile that restored faith in humanity. That, he said, is the healthiest agreement either of you have made. The weight that had been pressing on both men finally lifted. Not because the case ended, but because the burden did. As the hearing drew to a close, the courtroom felt transformed. What began as a simple ticket had unfolded into a journey neither man expected to take. Michael walked out of the courtroom with a steadiness he hadn't felt in years. His steps were lighter, his shoulders no longer pulled down by invisible chains. For the first time since that night on the bridge, he felt like his life belonged to him. Brandon followed beside him, not leading, not guiding, just walking. He no longer carried the need to control or correct. Instead, there was a quiet understanding in his stride, as if he, too, had been freed from a weight he never realized he carried. The two men didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. Their silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Judge Franklin watched them leave with a small, knowing smile. Cases like this were rare, but when they came, they reminded him why he sat on the bench year after year. Not to punish, not to lecture, but to help people see the parts of themselves they had forgotten. To remind them that compassion, truth, and understanding could change more than any fine ever could. Outside the courthouse, Michael finally looked at Brandon. Thank you, he said, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of sincerity. Brandon nodded. Thank you, too. It was a simple exchange, but one that carried the weight of a new beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional courtroom stories that remind us what kindness and humanity truly look like. And stay tuned. Another powerful story is already on the way.